Hey guys, it's Russell Matthews here, and if you've heard anything about Airbnb since the start of COVID, you'll no doubt have heard about the huge problems that both the company and individual units have been having. In Canada, we've seen tons of headlines saying that so many Airbnb units, especially in Vancouver and Toronto, our biggest cities, are failing. Former Airbnb owners have been forced to sell their properties or rent them out long-term at a loss. Now, I honestly don't have a lot of sympathy for people who went out and bought properties without making sure that the numbers would work with or without Airbnb. It's so important to have multiple exit strategies, and if you're taking the risk and putting all your eggs in one basket, then you can't be too upset when things don't go exactly the way you wanted it to. Then there was the blunder where Airbnb actually started asking guests to give extra money to Airbnb hosts. Definitely not a good look from a PR perspective. With all of this negativity surrounding Airbnb and the current health crisis, nobody would be stupid enough to start a new Airbnb, right? Right? Well, you know who was stupid enough? This guy. And today I'm going to tell you the story of exactly how that went. But before we get to it, take a second to subscribe to my channel and make sure to like the video. Do it for the all-powerful god of videos, the YouTube algorithm. Did you do it? Awesome, thank you. Now let's get into this story. I bought my 2-unit property in late 2019 to house hack, a strategy where you rent out a portion of the house in order to help pay the mortgage. This saves so much money on your monthly housing expenses, and it ends up leaving more income to invest, all while getting you into the market and building equity. Now, with a house hack property, you essentially have 3 options. You can 1. Rent out a separate unit to long-term tenants, 2. You could rent out each individual room to roommates that can live with you, and 3. You could choose to rent out some extra space on a short-term rental service like Airbnb. I decided to go with Airbnb because I thought, hey, it's probably going to be the most flexible. Whenever I have family in town or I'm hosting personal guests of my own, I can block off those days and make sure there's no guests downstairs and I can use the space myself. Plus, if Airbnb didn't work out for whatever reason, I could always just transition the unit into a typical long-term rental. So I went forward with my Airbnb plan and I did a bunch of cosmetic renovations to try to make the unit look as nice as possible. It looked super dated before, so it was definitely a necessity. I did a bunch of painting, changed out some flooring, changed out some trim, refreshed the bathroom, refreshed the kitchen, it definitely needed, and I even got a little bit of electrical work done. Of course, with Airbnb being my plan A, I had to furnish the entire unit, so that's beds, that's couches, that's everything you'd expect to be at a typical hotel, and then some. All in all, the process took me about 3 months to get to the point where there were just some finishing touches left. That brought me to mid-March, and we all know what happened around then. Government lockdowns, restrictions on travel, amidst other huge worldwide changes. This is when all the articles came out saying Airbnb hosts are failing, nobody's booking Airbnbs because of the pandemic. And to tell you the truth, this spooked me a little bit. I had heard how important it was to have a really strong launch for your Airbnb so you can get a couple good guests in, they leave good reviews, and that encourages more people to come. So for better or worse, I made the decision to take a pause for a couple of months and see how things shake out. So I waited, and I waited, and I waited some more, but eventually I had enough of waiting. I figured I should just take action and launch it, regardless of if it was the exact right time to do so. I thought I'd try it out for a couple months, and if it didn't work out, I'd switch it over to a long-term tenant. So I finished up the final little touches, and I took some professional quality photos of the entire unit. All in all, it was listed and ready to go by July. The night I listed it, I wondered if I'd get any views over the next couple of days, so I figured I'd just go to bed and take a look at it every once in a while and see how it was doing. The next morning, I woke up, rolled over, and took a look at my phone. I saw that it had 3 notifications. When I opened it up, each one of those was from Airbnb, and it was a different guest requesting to stay in my unit. Never in a million years did I think that I would have this kind of response on the first morning after I listed it. After seeing all the negative news about Airbnb, nobody traveling, the company's value going down, I thought I'd have nowhere near this level of interest. But lo and behold, each one of those booking requests ended up confirming their booking, and the unit's only been empty for about 4 days in the months since then. It just didn't make sense to me that there'd be this kind of interest this soon. Now, after thinking about it a little bit, and talking to some of the guests I've had, and talking to some of the guests that have already booked for the future, I think I've figured out just why this happened. I broke it down to 2 factors that really helped my Airbnb thrive in this uncertain time. Number 1 is that the unit is totally separate and totally private. I've had multiple different families who needed to come into Canada and as a result needed to do their 14 days of quarantine that's mandated by the Canadian government to prove that they don't have any COVID-19 symptoms. This is something I didn't even think about, but of course there's demand for this. People would far rather stay in a private unit than stay in a hotel or stay in a separate section of one of their family members' houses. I mean, you don't want to risk getting them sick if you're living in the same sort of space. The second reason is that I believe by renovating, decorating, and stocking the Airbnb to a very high level, I believe I've created a unit that's all around more desirable than others in my area. At first I thought I'd have a pretty high vacancy rate because my unit isn't really close to anything. It's just in a suburban area away from most attractions. When I looked at the stats for other units in the area, most places were empty about a third of the time. Even if these other units in my area don't have a very high occupancy rate, by creating such a desirable unit, I think I'm tending to get those bookings over them. One of the biggest lessons I learned from this was that average statistics are just that. They're average. If you can make, build, or design something that's all around above average, then it makes sense that you should be able to outperform these market averages. And I think this could be expanded to any area of life. It's important not to naively overvalue how much better you can do than average, but there is a time and a place to recognize, hey, if I can create something or make something or be something that's better than average, then my results are going to be better than average too. And you can do that too with anything you're trying to work on. Think of the huge effect that being slightly above average consistently will have over time. Imagine the change that could happen in your life if you were just consistently slightly above average. Over time, who knows how much of an effect that can have on your life. But that finishes up my story time for how I thought I lost my chance to start my Airbnb. I hope it can help you to make decisions for whatever you're working on and not to totally buy into the doom and gloom that we often see if we start watching too much news. So with that said, thanks so much for listening, you guys. As always, like this video, subscribe if you really liked it, and hit that notification bell. Also, you can follow me on Instagram if you want to stay connected over there. And if you've made it this far, tell me down in the comments, has COVID stopped you from taking action on any of your current plans? Or did you find some sort of way around it to keep moving forward? I respond to every single comment I get down there, so let's start a conversation. But anyways, that's it for me, you guys, and I'll see you next time.